Welcome back to the Amputee Coalition's Virtual Advocacy Forum. For those of you who weren't here this afternoon or yesterday, I'm Carol Blymeyer, and I'll help host our conversations here today as part of the Advocacy Forum. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, we are recording these sessions and they will be sent to you via email for rewatching. Also, part of the recording is the chat. So the chat will go into an archive as well, so you'll be able to refer to that later. We ask that you conduct yourself in the chat as you would on any social media platform. Be kind and respectful of one another, have some fun, engaging conversations, and just be mindful about the kinds of personal information that you might share there. If you have a question at all for any of our presenters today, please type it into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. On that side of your screen, you will see prompts for the chat, the Q&A, polls, and handouts. The handouts have a lot of great information that will provide background details for you about all the issues that we're talking about and some of the words that we're using. And so that's where you'll be able to find that. But if you have questions for me or for any of our experts today, please type those into the Q&A box so we can make sure that we get those asked as part of the conversation. So let's talk about who's joining us today. First, from the Amputee Coalition, we have Mary Richards, who is the president and CEO. We also have Dan Ignazuski, who is the Amputee Coalition's Chief Policy and Programs Officer. And joining us again today, you met him yesterday, is Matthew Zablud from the Beekeeper Group. So again, in the handouts tab, there's more information and biographies of all the speakers, and you can get to know them a little bit better. So now I'm going to turn it over to the CEO of the Amputee Coalition, Mary Richards, who will tell us what we have in store for this session. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Carol. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. Welcome back to the Virtual Advocacy Forum. We're hosting this forum because the Amputee Coalition's mission is to reach out to and empower people affected by limb loss to achieve their full potential through education, support, and advocacy, and to promote limb loss prevention. We have unparalleled education and support programs. Now we want to elevate advocacy as a priority. So here are our goals for this evening's session. This evening, you will learn how to tell your story, how to make your story relevant to our asks, and tips and tricks to show your member of Congress and their staff that you care about our community. As I've said, I'm a deep believer you are the experts on living with limb loss and limb difference. Your voice matters. This session will help you make sure that you are heard. I'm delighted that through the evening session or afternoon session, depending on where you are, it will be Matthew is going to lead us through his remarks and help for you about telling your story. Dan and Carol and I will be available to answer questions, and Carol will be your guide to lead you through the sessions this afternoon. On that note, I'd like to hand it back to Carol to get us started with a quick poll.
Thank you, Mary. So on your screen, up pops a poll. Do you have an elevator pitch for your story? When you think about your personal story as part of your limb loss or limb difference journey, do you have an elevator pitch? Go ahead and type in your answer. Yes, no, or what the heck is an elevator pitch? So go ahead and click one of the options there, then click on the submit button, and we are going to see what our answers are. Okay, still got some coming in, but it looks like more than half of you have an elevator pitch. Awesome. 25% of you have said, what the heck is an elevator pitch? We're going to answer that in about 2 minutes. And just 17% of you said, nope, I don't have one. So for those of you who have one, awesome. We're going to help you refine it even further. And for those of you who don't have one or don't really know what an elevator pitch is, we're going to help you build one today. Matthew is going to talk us through that. So love these results. If you want to refer back to them during the course of our conversation, you've seen them pop up on your screen. They'll also be stored in the polls section of your dashboard. Having an elevator pitch is really important. It's about telling your personal story, but in a very short, succinct, and compelling way. We also need an elevator pitch to help us learn how to craft our personal story in conjunction with what we call our asks, the things that we are asking Congress to do to support our community. So to help us do that, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, who is here with us from the Beekeeper Group. You may remember him from the first session that we did on Sunday. So I'm going to let Matthew take it away from here. All yours.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you're able to hear me clearly. If we need issues, the presenters will wave at me and let me know. But thank you all for participating and for being a part of everything yesterday and then coming back today. It's always encouraging. Yesterday we kind of dealt with part one, about what it is to be a leader, and then more importantly, how you can apply that leadership and whether you're the right what to get involved, and then a little bit about the culture of Capitol Hill and how your connections and the way you tell your story and the way you can bring your important engagement with staffers and members of Congress to the Hill. So a lot of the references we made there were about how you can actually tell your story in an interesting way and why storytelling is important. And we didn't just do that to tell you, something that you're going to have to do in the future. We had a very good plan of coming back this evening and giving you some good tips and advice. So we're going to start our agenda today, which is telling a story. We're then going to talk about know your ask. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. And then we're going to talk about some other options for taking actions. Transition to our first slide here. And on our first slide is telling your story. I've always liked this illustration. If you want to come and get a nice marketing firm to convince consumers that we're authentic and transparent, and that is a huge problem for organizations when they're trying to engage their members on the Hill. You have authentic stories. Your stories are going to be transparent. There's some agility, ubiquity, all these concepts that make up a really strong story. And we can't give that to you. We can't tell you what to say about your own story. We can help you shape it. We can help you improve on it, maybe make it a little more succinct so that you can get to the key points that you ultimately need to get to. But it's your story, and that authenticity and the way you tell that story is important. Now, you have also something that you can show in a lot of instances, whether it's a device or something else. That's another part of your story. We'll talk a little bit more about how that plays a role. So we'll move to our next slide. And on our next slide, we're talking about the benefits of storytelling. And we kind of know this because we've all grown up. I used to do this presentation. My son, now 7, and a pretty fun 7-year-old, I will admit, because I've been at home with him for now 6 weeks. And so I must love him because I'm still happy to be at home with him, which is okay. But when he was really little, he would read The Hungry Caterpillar, right? And the little engine that could, these sort of stories that you can remember and that had this kind of core message. Well, that's no different. Those fundamentals of those kinds of stories is what creates an emotional connection. And if you saw what I did, I talked about something at the beginning here that's very common to a lot of us, which is that we have kids. I talked about something that we're all relating to at the moment right now, which is how a lot of us are handling COVID-19. And I made a little bit of a joke, kind of something cute. That's what it is. That's literally, you've learned some of the key elements of storytelling just in trying to establish that emotional connection and the interlinking of shared values. Then when we're also doing a storytelling, we're trying to bring attention. We're trying to do something that's memorable, empowerment, and most importantly, something that's hypnotizing. So honestly, I don't know that much about what it's like to live with limb loss. That's not part of my story. But you're coming in and you're talking to other individual officers who may also not know that directly. Maybe they have a family member, but maybe they don't. I know from myself that there are certain interesting elements of your story. There's potentially, how you are in the condition that you're in, and I know that can be a very emotional and challenging thing to talk about. But also the device you have is that prosthetic device could be interesting to people, and the technology has been changing, and that's, I know, something that you're going to be talking to, and that's sometimes part of the ask that you might be making. If you feel comfortable, and again, only if you feel comfortable, that is something that's great to be able to share. That's not something that every advocate is going to have, and that really is a good way to potentially start with both, to me, the empowerment and also some of the destigmatizing, which is really important aspect of storytelling. So we'll move to our next. So some of you will be familiar with the Humans of New York, which is just a whole display and trying to tell the stories of different people coming from all different kinds of life. Well, that's what we want you to do with your own story. Yesterday there were a couple of questions about, if I didn't have a connection with a member of Congress, is that okay? Or if I don't know what the ask is that okay? Here's where I really want to tell you that not coming across as perfect, not having it all exactly the way you want it, not knowing exactly where you're coming from, coming with questions, it's what helps portray that emotion and what gives you that authentic voice. And we talked a little bit about this, but I know it's sort of funny to phrase this as finding your central character, but in some ways, your central character could be you, it could be a family member, it could be the way that your experience is impacting other family or being experienced by other family, and it could be your device. Whatever you feel the most comfortable with, that's the story that you want to tell. And you should try, as you do this with different audiences and you do this with different staff members and different visits, try doing a different part of your story each time and see how comfortable you feel with it and see the reaction that from your audience. It's funny because, and we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, we're doing all of this stuff virtually, and we're going to probably be doing a lot more of this virtually. And it's really challenging right now on my screen. I know there's hundreds of you in the audience, but I'm effectively talking to 3 people, which are my 3 co-presenters, who are the only faces that I see. And that's great because that's even enough just to get their reaction. And that's helping me understand it. And I would say the same thing when you're trying to do this virtually. If you feel comfortable, have a family member in the room, or try and do this with a webinar, but so that you have a little bit of an audience, so that you're telling your story like you would to anybody else. Otherwise, it's challenging just to tell it to sort of a blank screen and not really give a response back. Thankfully, hopefully, our members of Congress are getting used to Zoom and other tools, and you'll be able to see their face on the other line. But if not, if you're ever in this situation, anything you can do to help it feel more real and normal, speaking like you're telling a story, that's going to be the hit there. Now, we talk about give an opportunity to respond. You guys are living that. One of the reasons that there's the chat feature, one of the reasons that there's a way to do questions, one of the reasons why the Amputee Coalition team has prioritized things like the polls and the surveys, is that engagement and that response is really, really valuable. Now, when you're doing that one-on-one, that just means giving an opportunity to almost take a pause. Just take a pause. Most people, when you're talking to them, when you pause, they'll try to fill it. It's just sort of a human nature thing. So use that to your advantage. Questions are great. And if you can get somebody who's asking a question about your particular situation or your device, or hopefully your ask, but you might have to push a little harder to get there, that's wonderful. Next is embracing multimedia. It's funny. These are slides from that I've given trainings on this for a long time, and these are slides from many years ago. And I never really thought multimedia would quite be as impactful and important as now. But the importance of understanding that a lot of this stuff can be done virtually, that your story can be told in a range of different ways. It can be done on social media. It can be done through video. It could be a letter. Sometimes it's just a photo. It doesn't have to be a long form version of telling your story. It just depends on the medium that you're using. And we'll talk a little bit about that and where else you get. And then if you can, share your values. We talked about that, but be specific without getting into detail. A good way to do that, again, another technique I'm using, is you have your notes in front of you, little bullet points, something to keep you on track. That's the best way to ensure that you're going through. If you want to practice it with somebody, feel free to do that. But again, don't over practice it. Don't spend too much time worrying about it, or you're going to lose that authentic voice that we really want you to have. And then be ethical. And there's two parts to being ethical, and we don't talk about this enough when it comes to storytelling. It's all fine on your own story. You can tell your story. You have that power to explain it the way you want to. But if you're explaining somebody else's story, if it's a family member, if it's a friend, if it's somebody else, make sure you've really got their permission. Make sure you've thought about what the implications are of that. If you're working with a group and you're working with individuals and you're collecting stories, really make sure you understand what you're doing, why they're participating, that they have full knowledge and full consent of what may happen, that you may use their photo, their video, their story for something else. It's just really, really important. We don't talk about it enough. We'll transition over to our next slide. So this next slide, which is tell your story and be specific, partially because it's such a long quote. I was like, man, I feel like it should be quicker and to the point if I was going to give you an example of be specific. But I really liked what's going on here and what they're talking about. And I like the analogy of a poem or a painting or a piece of music. What they're really trying to do is evoke a sense. You're not going to have a huge amount of time when you're talking to a member of Congress. You might, in different contexts, be able to tell your story in a longer format, but they're trying to get a taste of it, trying to get a feel. And I think this is a really important example. We'll move to our next slide. So we started off with being ethical, and I want to reiterate that point, but here are some examples of ways that we can share our story, not just when we're telling them to a member of Congress or their staff, but also generally sharing it in the community. First and foremost, authorization to do so. If you're capturing a public official or somebody like that, it's pretty much implied. You're likely going to have permission, but if you're not sure, check. It's also really important when you're posting to mentioning communities, groups, officials, all of that kind of stuff. They want the love. If you remember, we talked about it yesterday. They're looking for the good press. If you're going to give them bad press, if you're going to be critical of them when you're doing an app mentioning, make sure you're very aware of what that is. If you're sure about what the implications are of that, feel free to talk to the folks in the coalition and they can give you advice. But at the same time, you need to be your authentic self. And if you feel something and you feel you want to say it, that's a way to make sure that the audience you're targeting will see it and pay attention to it. And we know that happens. We know that the tweets and other social media posts that actually mention an elected official do get paid attention to in their office, not just but also the staff who are monitoring. Use and engage with industry hashtags. That means most of you probably know this, but if you are familiar with the hashtags, find out common hashtags related to the Amputee Coalition. They can share those with you. And when you're commenting there, it means that your messages will kind of end up in that same string. It makes it easier for people to find and for discussions, so on and so forth. Stick to highly visual content. Photos, videos are so powerful. And again, it doesn't just have to be like me here sitting in front of you, sitting in front of a camera. It can be your device. It could be something else that's part of your daily life. Whatever it is you feel comfortable sharing, but the more visual, the better. And ask people to share and reshare. One of the biggest problems in storytelling, one of the biggest problems in getting involved in advocacy generally is that, and one of the most common reasons I get for why people aren't involved is that nobody asked me. Someone will say, well, nobody asked me to get involved. I really wanted to do this. Nobody asked me and I didn't know. And if you've ever been that person, you have to ask people to share it. They don't always know if it's appropriate to share. They don't always know if you want them to share it. So really push through, make it clear that's what you want them to do. In return, It's share, share, and share alike. So hopefully you'll start promoting the online efforts of others, and they'll see that and they'll return the favor, or at least appreciate it. And maybe you're not so comfortable with your story yet, but you do see somebody else that has a story that that is basically an example of what it is you want to say. Start by sharing that. You can always come back in later and add your story to it, or add a comment, or move forward. But the most important thing is to start to get this information out there. Linking to a call to action. I'm going to give you some resources in a little bit of where you can go and what the different kinds of calls to action are. But it's great to tell your story, but you know what it's like. Someone's told you something great, you're ready, you want to do something about it, and then you're like, what is this? Where do I go? What's the next thing I do here? So try and link to a call to action. The Amputee Coalition website has a number of those. And then use first person as much as possible. This should be your story, but unless you are helping someone else tell theirs. But it's your story. You feel free to be personal the way you want to tell it, and it will make a difference. It really will. We'll go to the slide. We're going to talk a little bit about our elevator pitch. So on our next slide, we're talking about know your ask. And in know your ask, it's going to be different for different people in different situations. But first of all, prepare an elevator pitch version of your personal story. What is an elevator pitch personal version of your personal story? Okay, so you can think of it in terms of your business or where you work. It's that 15-second version explaining what it is that you do. I have a weird job in Washington, D.C. that I have to explain to my relatives in Australia. So my elevator pitch gets a little bit long, and I use lots of beekeeping analogies because my company's called Beekeeper Group, but that's okay. However you need to get through it, but find some way to condense that down. And again, that is one area where you should practice with somebody else. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Please don't read it off a card when you come into the office. Just have a sense of it and you'll go in the right direction. We mentioned it before, but your device is interesting to policymaker audiences. Feel free to show it off if you feel comfortable. Then take it the next step. Talk about what your prosthetic device allows you to do. Or alternatively, if you can't get access to the care you need or others can't, explain the impact on you and your family of not being able to get kind of access. So you'll see here, just in this structure, the initial part of our storytelling, we've got a quick pitch version of your story, a little bit of show and tell, connecting your story with what allows you to do. This is starting to be, that's an important focus when we're trying to get an elected official to think about the policy implications of something, and then also why you can't get access to care that you need. You're starting to talk in terms of policy terms, even though you might not realize you are. That's the message that's being conveyed to the staff. They know what. We'll go to the next slide. So in this particular instance, this is going to be the direct ask. This is going to be the element that you're probably going to get told from the Amputee Coalition before you head up to the Hill, or if you're doing a virtual meeting, and this is probably the thing that's most to them. Here's the problem. This might not always be the thing that's most important to you. And this is where you have to understand that balance and know that you're a storyteller for yourself and you're an advocate for yourself, but you're also a storyteller and an advocate for your community. And sometimes you need to be able to make sure that ask is consistent so that it can come across in the way that you need and in the way that's going to reinforce all the other people who are trying to share their story at the same time. So it's okay if the ask is narrow. In some instances, it's just going to be offering a thank you. And honestly, that's the best kind. You get to go to an office and say, hey, I just came here and I just want to thank you for the support. Maybe it's the support during the COVID-19 crisis. If they give you that ask, be thankful that they gave you. That's always really nice. Sometimes it's coming to seek funding support for a particular need. And that's a little bit more, you might find that the office is going to. If you don't know the answer, don't pretend that you do. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be there and say, I know that's something that you could follow up with the coalition on, or I'd be happy to send you some information because they provided me some great one pages, some other material. There's a website I know I can send you a link to. Don't feel like you have to answer that, but often you'll be given a lot of information on funding, support, and other types. That's really you focus on that. And again, with all of that, if you're feeling like you don't know or you're not comfortable, please reach out to the coalition to learn about the ask. And here's the easiest way to think about it. If you don't know what the ask is, it's probably worth reaching out. Just a good rule of thumb. but that'll really set you up in the best way and give you the right level of confidence when you go into the room. So we'll move to the next slide and talk a little bit about taking action. So on taking action, really thinking about here is how can you effectively equip and empower yourself with the best tools, digital and non-digital, to help you take valuable advocacy action. So I'm going to give you now a list of all the different tools at your disposal. And you'll see there's quite a long list here. Now, I'm just waiting for it to come up on mine, but it'll come up in a minute here. Thank you. So the tools at your disposal. Guess what? The Amputee Coalition email list to receive action alerts sent to Congress, right? I know you get a heap of these. They're an amazing tool. It's really, really helpful. Personalized letters and emails to members of Congress. This is another thing that you'll get a lot of requests on. And sometimes you might get a request to do a custom email, where it's really easy to fill in your name and sign something. If there's an option to personalize that, please take it. It really makes a difference. If you are able to spend a little bit of extra time and write a personalized email with your own subject line that takes the key points, that's something that's really valuable to officers, and they understand that. They won't always give you a response. Most of them will, though, and it's really nice to get that back, but it makes a huge difference. Letters to the editor of local publications. We kind of forget about these, and we don't talk about them as much as we should. But now, in particular, during this time, I think letters to the editor are really important. I worked for a member of parliament in Australia for a number of years. The first thing she would always do was up to the letters to the editor. She took them way too seriously. We kind of had to say to her, hey, this is just one person's opinion. It's okay. But that's not necessarily a bad thing from your point of view. So if you're feeling empowered, maybe you've written that letter and you're like, you know what, I feel like I've got a few more minutes here. You can just repurpose that and use that as a letter to the editor. Video stories. So video stories were one of the hardest things to collect 2 months ago. Now, maybe not so much. We're a little bit more comfortable with this medium. We're a little bit more comfortable turning our laptops on and taking the video. And it doesn't have to be great quality, and it doesn't have to be perfect lighting, and it doesn't have to be the best sound ever. Sorry, production guys, I apologize. But it doesn't have to be. It has to be as good as you can reasonably get it. But these video stories are really valuable. And send them in. They can be transmitted to the members of Congress. They can be used in different things that the coalition needs to use them for. They can be featured in maps, a whole range of different uses for videos on social media, all across these different elements. So please do send them in. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about in-district meetings. Term of art, when we talk about it, we have Hill meetings and in-district meetings. So Hill meetings just means you've come to Washington, D.C. In-district meetings is you're meeting with a member of Congress or their staff in the district. For some reason, we put so much more weight on the Hill meetings, and they are really, really important, but they're also a lot of work. And those in-district meetings are really, really valuable too. And those staff members are often really connected to the member of Congress, and they know their communities, and they want to meet with you. We talked again yesterday about this. You might want to time your meetings. I know everybody wants to talk to the member of Congress, but they're not always the most important person to talk to. Sometimes the staff are equally as valuable. So when the member is in DC, that's the time to reach out in the district to the staff. When the member's back in the district and you know there's an event coming up, try not to have too much when they're going to not have as much time. Town halls, attend them. Sometimes go to listen, speak if there's an opportunity. There's also virtual town halls. It's another way to get involved. Again, if you're not sure what you are going to say, or you're worried that what you're going to say is run counter to what the coalition wants to talk about, just reach out and ask them in advance. Let them know what you're doing. They'll provide you a ton of help. Fundraisers, they happen in the community all the time. If you're someone that goes to those and that's an opportunity for you to tell your story and build that connection and show involvement, please feel free. I think that is a fantastic way to get involved. And then networking, which we talked a lot about yesterday. I was amazed with the number of responses that Carol was telling us that we got in response to that. I mean, it's just awesome. It's not surprising to me. It's not surprising because people forget how much they're connected with members of Congress and staff and things like that. But please leverage those personal connections with members of Congress and their staff. And then finally, we'll go to our last slide, which is a quick recap before I think we'll do a Q&A here. And we'll do a quick recap, not only of what we talked about today, but also some of the elements that we talked about yesterday. First, you are the best advocate. You really are. We wouldn't be spending the time. You wouldn't be spending the time if that weren't true. You may be surprised who you know. I think we've said sometimes it really, really is important. I probably should have repetition as important too in here, but leave that for another time. Our culture is unique. It's really unique. So use it to your advantage. Hill staffers are gatekeepers to members of Congress. Befriend them. Be a valuable resource to members of Congress by sharing your story concisely and maintaining focus on the key asks. You are providing value to them, but only if you can do it in a way that fits in, not to their timetable, but the understanding that they are busy and there's lots of priorities. And then please use Amplify, which is an awesome tool set that you guys have that not every group has on the Amputee Coalition website, and other tools to take action and get your voice heard. Thank you for taking the time with me today, and I'd love to take any questions and throw it back to the panel.
Thank you, Matthew. That was a lot of great information. We are gonna, before we go to the Q&A, we're gonna throw one more poll up on your screen just to do a little quiz to see what you've learned, and then we'll open up some Q&A. So we wanna know from you, what all have you done in terms of telling your story and a little bit of advocacy? Go ahead and check all the boxes of things that you've done. Have you gone to a town hall meeting? Have you volunteered for a campaign? Have you ever done a meeting in state or in DC? Have you written an email to your member of Congress? Go ahead and click all the boxes that apply and then hit the submit button. And let's see what our audience has been up to. Are you seeing these results pop up on screen? Looks like a lot of you have written a letter or an email to your member of Congress. And then we've got that a lot of you have done some town hall meetings. You've gone to meetings with your member of Congress when they've been back in the district or when your senator has been back in state. You've gone to fundraisers, you've volunteered for a campaign, you've written a letter to the editor of your newspaper. These are all great. You guys have really all done at least one thing. That's fantastic. I love that. I'm going to go to the Q&A now, and let's start throwing some questions out. So if we can have Matthew and Mary and Dan on my screen, there we go. So the four of us are going to answer these questions. The first one, and this is a really important one. How do you feel about the use of humor in your personal story? Any thoughts?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I think humor is a great approach. I think that there's a lot of great ways that you can weave humor into the discussion. You want to make sure that it's tasteful and make sure that you're being respectful and responsible with the humor. But, I've met a lot of people that are part of this community, and a lot of folks have a great sense of humor. We've had people go up with, funny T-shirts and things like that help to sort of ease the conversation with members and help to make it more approachable in many ways. And so humor can often be used in that type of capacity. Mary or Matthew, I don't know if either of you have anything else to add there.
I mean, I just agree that your natural sensibility and the way that you engage with others about your life, I think is the way we really think, as Matthew was saying, authenticity matters. We know that vulnerability in an appropriate way matters too. And I think that humor is really helpful. To Dan's point, it's probably not the same humor that we use when we're just hanging out with our friends. Remember that it's an elected official or their staff member, but we're all human beings and we want to connect on that basis. So please feel free to be yourself and to bring those elements in.
Okay, then we've got a, go
So
ahead, Matthew.
I would
Sorry
disagree. I would not use humor. I'm just kidding. I really, no, look, you have to, yeah. But there you go, right? It's disarming. So humor is a great method to do that and to get a good reaction. You got to know how to be funny. Just avoid anything that would be offensive if you can. But I do agree with both Mary and Dan. Whatever makes you the most comfortable, and it's not the most comfortable situation to be in. You know, I've been doing public speaking and stuff like that, and I still get nervous, and that's okay. That nervous energy can be what helps you get that connection.
That's great. We've got a couple of questions all on the same topic. So it's about letters to the editor of news publications. We've got a couple people who are a little confused. Why would we do that? Why is that a good way to get attention? And then some other folks want to know, who do you write the letter to? Which media outlets are you supposed to go big national? Or do you stay local? Like, do you have to get it in the New York Times, or is your own newspaper good? So Matthew, why don't you give us a little answer on that, and then I can chime in too with some of the best practices that I've seen folks do.
Sure, absolutely. No, it doesn't have to go to the New York Times. That would be great, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. This is hyper-local. Your member of Congress, the staff, are looking at these local papers. You're really trying to focus on them and the general community as well. It's not going without. That's the core audience you're going after. They're paying attention to it. A lot of these smaller papers craving these kinds of letters, so you have a much higher chance of getting in. It may not happen straight away, but they'll eventually get to your letter, and who knows, it might open up an opportunity for you to even get a meeting or to get a different kind of response. I will say, if you do get any kind of response, please do send it in to the Amputee Coalition. They're going to know what that is and see if there's good opportunity for follow-up.
Carol, before you jump in, can I just share that I worked for a couple members of Congress. They would get a mention in the New York Times, didn't rate nearly as high as a letter to the editor in a weekly paper in a small town in the congressional district. Matthew, your point about the Australian parliamentarian, it holds true here as well. Those local papers matter a lot, and it's those editorial boards that are publishing your letter to the editor that will sometimes support candidates or highlight their activities in good, bad, or otherwise ways. And so it is all a part of that engagement that members of Congress want to have back at home and in their congressional district. Carol, I'll hand it off to you. As you guys probably know from reading Carol's bio, I'll just share with you that this is an area in which Carol Bleimeyer is a true expert and knows what she's talking about in terms of communications and media strategy. So let me hand it off to Carol.
So every senator and every House member has a wide variety of staff members that do a lot of things. They also have between 3 to 5 communications staffers. They have a press secretary, a communications director, and then communications staff that reports into them. There's one person whose job it is every single day to scan the media of their state or their congressional district to see what is being said about issues and to see what people are saying about that senator or that representative. And the first thing that those staffers do is they look at the opinion page and they look at letters to the editor. It is still one of the first things that House and Senate offices do every morning when they put together what they call their clips package. So everything that is in the news that's around that member's issues or the member of Congress, him or herself. So they pay a lot of attention to letters to the editor. And I think you all will be pleased, or maybe a little scared to know, is that after the forum in the next couple of days, we're going to send to you a template letter to the editor. We're going to send a letter to the editor that is worded around the congressional ask that we're going to have you do. And then you get to add a sentence of your own personal story, and then you get to send it to your local newspaper. Letters to the editor have to be short. They can be no more than 200 words. A lot of people like to send in lengthy essays, and then they get mad when they see that the letter got cut really short and that editor changed my words. It's not what happened. They only have room to print 200 words. So we're going to help you craft that and teach you how to do it, because it's a really important way to get your message heard and to get our issues in front of members of Congress. It also helps to do it around times that are breaking news events. If you can find ways to hook in that notion of being someone who is living with limb loss or limb difference and how that relates to something that's going on in the world or in our culture, that's another way that you can get a letter to the editor printed in your local newspaper. And they still do read the print versions as well as the online versions on Capitol Hill. Believe it or not, they still get print newspapers delivered to their offices every morning. All right, we've got one more question. The question is, how do we know when we're telling our story, how do we know what community groups or elected officials to reach out to? Who are the most important ones we should be talking to on a national or local level?
That's a great question. If I can, we're going to have, with respect to some of the requests and the asks and things like that we're going to be asking you to participate in, we're going to have this template that's going to allow you to basically fill out and put in information about who you are, where you're from. That'll automatically populate with respect to these asks to be able to go directly to your elected officials at the federal level. So it'll go to your representative in your state, or in your district. It'll also go to both of your senators. There are other asks that, depending on what we're asking for, depending on what the focus is, where it may be appropriate to be able to ask your state elected officials, or your governor even, for gubernatorial proclamations for Limb Loss Awareness Month, for example. There are different ways that we tailor asks. There are different ways that we make those asks and requests. When it comes to the template tools and things like that the Amputee Coalition is able to provide, we're able to help navigate who those offices are. And those will often go to the appropriate staff member that deals with those types of issues. So that's the way we're able to help out in terms of helping to narrow and focus some of those requests. But depending on what you're reaching out about, there are a variety of different methods and ways to convey your story and convey your message and advocate for yourself and for the community. Legislative offices, both at the state level and the federal level, often get directly involved in individual cases and individual situations. So if you have challenges that you're not getting what you need, there's also opportunities to be able to engage with them with your story in that capacity as well. And so helping to identify that, we can do that through the National Limb Loss Resource Center, and then also through some of our advocacy programs and our lead advocate program.
Before I turn this back over to Mary to wrap up, we did have a couple questions just come through on the chat as well as the Q&A that are all around this one topic. And it is, when we talk about sharing videos on social media around our asks, what does that mean? What does that sound like? How long should they be? I'm going to turn it to Matthew to answer, but let me first say that your videos have to be short and to the point. The recent research that just came out shows that the average American adult has the attention span for 6 seconds of online video. So if your video isn't interesting or compelling in those first few seconds, people click away to something else, and they really only have the capacity to watch 6 seconds of something to determine if it's something that they want to be interested in. So if it's on social media, it's got to be short. It's my name is Carol. I am living with blank. I am calling on Senator Van Hollen to fund the Department of Health and Human Services for $4 million so that the National Limb Loss Resource Center can help people living with limb loss or limb difference. And Matthew, I look to you to add any other advice you have for sharing video on social media and what that should look like.
Carol, that was so perfect. I don't know that I can improve on it. The only thing I might add is it depends on what the video is being used for. So on social media, I'm not going to go on top of what Carol said, because that's right. That 100% keep it short and sweet. But if it's something that the coalition is collecting, or they want you to go a little bit more into your story, that's when you can be a little bit more long form, because they'll have the ability to edit it. Maybe they're compiling it for something and putting something together. So just think of the purpose and way to give you a sense of what the length is.
Great. Go ahead, Mary.
We've seen a couple of our other patient advocacy organizations in Washington have done campaigns online where if legislation is enacted or if members move funding priorities, that it can be really fun to have the same hashtag and to just do that 6-second thank you. And then you have, wearing orange or holding up a sign or wearing your ribbons and saying, I want to say thank you to Senator Van Hollen or whomever else, and then just giving that quick snapshot and truly and tagging your member of Congress, so then they can actually search their own name, and what they see is a flood of people living with limb loss saying thank you or saying please, and just a quick snippet. And so those sorts of campaigns are things that we will think about through the year. But to Matthew's point, we will never be opaque or secretive about that. We'll give you all of the information that you need to participate in a campaign like that. I mean campaign with a small c, sort of not a political campaign, but an advocacy campaign. And those are the things that we'll be looking out to do for our organization and to engage you to make sure that we're all speaking from this, or singing from the same songbook is always more powerful.
Yep. Great Q&A, everyone. Great questions that you submitted. Thank you, Matthew, for being with us again today. We're really glad you were here to talk to folks about how to tell your story and all the different ways we can do that to connect with our members of Congress. I am going to turn it over to Mary. I will let you know that tomorrow our guest expert is Laura Truman. She is the director of the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs for the Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS. So that's tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But let me kick it to Mary for some wrap-up thoughts, and then she's going to kick it back to me to give you all some housekeeping items for tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Carol. And thank you, Matthew, for joining us again today. It was so helpful to hear how to tell our story, how to connect it to our asks. I think we look forward to being able to get involved in the CQ Engage program tomorrow to send emails to our members of Congress. We will hear from Laura Truman tomorrow at 11 a.m. We will also have a session to help you with the logistics of walking through how to send your emails to Capitol Hill. And I hope that you have a chance to practice telling your story, whether it's in the chat or with a friend or loved one this evening. And we hope that you feel prepared as we go into tomorrow. There's more help to come, but we hope that you're feeling more and more prepared. I do want to say that like the session so far, tomorrow with Laura Truman, who is the Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs at the Department of Health and Human Services, a mouthful, but she represents the office at the Department of Health and Human Services that understands what's going on at the National Institutes of Health, at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, at the Administration for Community Living. And then she works outside of the Department of Health and Human Services to coordinate with folks like the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, and other organizations and departments that work really closely with us. So as we speak with Laura tomorrow, she is a part of the administration, but tomorrow's conversation is not a political conversation. Limb loss and limb difference are not partisan. They affect people of both political parties, and both political parties support funding for the National Limb Loss Resource Center. The National Limb Loss Resource Center was included in this year's president's budget. We have had in the past both Republican and Democratic majorities in the House and Senate have supported our request. So we look forward tomorrow to a substantive and polite conversation with someone who's focused on helping our community. Whether you agree or disagree with the administration's other policies, it's important that as advocates and leaders, we engage with the federal government to accomplish as much as we can for people living with limb loss and limb difference. Your advocacy here can help raise the profile of our issues and help millions of people across the country. I know it's going to be a great conversation with Laura. I know that we're all going to look forward to hearing what she has to say. I know it's going to be a great meeting. Carol, with that, thank you to you and Dan and Matthew, but let me hand it back to you to take care of the last couple of items before we sign off for the evening.
Great. Thank you, Mary. We are really excited for tomorrow's conversation with Laura Truman. We're also really excited about all of the conversations and the questions that are happening both in the Q&A tab as well as the chat function. Because we can't be together in person right now, and because travel is so expensive anyway, whether or not we're quarantined, or who knows what the airlines will do when we all get back to whatever normal is going to look like, we want to continue to find ways to engage with you all virtually and online. And we were seeing a lot of that in the chat yesterday, that you were looking for that as well. So if we were to host a virtual, let's just call it a happy hour. I have coffee hour in my notes, but let's be real. Let's just do a happy hour. If we were going to do something online with you all, maybe this Friday for a happy hour, what platforms are you most comfortable on? Do you all use Facebook? Have you used the new Facebook or the Facebook virtual chatting tool? Are you using Zoom? Are you using any other platforms, whether it's through home or through work? Let us know how you're getting together with people in groups so that we can think further down the road the best way that we can serve you in terms of getting people together more regularly. We want you all to get together to share best practices with each other and to hear how your different advocacy outreach exploits are going. So we want to provide a platform for that to happen. We are going to host something, we think, for you all on Friday, because we want to get this group back together at the end of the week after you've made your ask to your members of Congress tomorrow. And then we want to see, if you start to hear back from them by the end of the week. And we want to open up some extra time for Q&A. We realized we packed these sessions pretty tight with explanation and education. And as we tried to get to as many questions as we could, we know that we weren't able to get to all of them. So we want to provide some time on Friday for you all to talk with one another again in the chat function. And then we'll provide our time and expertise as well to answer any questions you might have about public policy, telling your story, reaching out to members of Congress. So you tell us, we're going to leave this chat function open. Even after we sign off, we're going to leave it open for another 15 minutes or so. So we want you to continue to interact with each other. You send us messages in the chat, tell us how we can be of best service to you. And I think we're going to see you not only tomorrow, but again later this week. So we will see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. So if you need to come with your hair all mussed up and your coffee and unshaven, we can't see you. It doesn't matter. Show up however you want to show up. We are all used to going to meetings with members of Congress all dressed up in our suits and our dresses. So it'll be nice for us to actually reach out to members of Congress with you and not have to be as formally dressed up as we usually are. So tomorrow, our final informational session of the forum, and we're going to walk with you step by step in how to reach out to your member of Congress about our congressional asks. So we'll see you tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Check your email inboxes for the link that you can use to join. If you don't see it in your inbox, check your spam or junk, just in case it accidentally went in there. And again, we're going to keep the chat function open, so keep on talking and tell us how we can best serve you. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you tomorrow.